The Rohingya crisis is one of the most pressing issues of our time. This documentary sheds light on the Rohingya refugee crisis, covering the atrocities they faced, the journey they had to take to reach safety, their current living conditions in the camps, and the uncertain future they face. Will the world take action to help the Rohingya people, or will they continue to suffer and be forgotten? The Bangladeshi government has taken in over 1 million Rohingya refugees and provided them with shelter, food, and medical care. The country has faced many challenges in accommodating such a large number of refugees, but it has continued to work with international organizations to provide aid and support. Despite the ongoing crisis, Bangladesh has shown remarkable generosity and hospitality towards the Rohingya people, offering hope for a better future for these displaced communities. Chapter 1: How it started. The Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, also known as the Rakhine State conflict, began in August 2017 when Rohingya militants attacked police posts in Myanmar's Rakhine State. This led to a military crackdown on the Rohingya people, a predominantly Muslim minority group living in the state. The military's response was swift and brutal, resulting in widespread violence and forced displacement of hundreds of thousands of Rohingya people. The Rohingya people have faced persecution and discrimination in Myanmar for decades, with the government denying them citizenship and basic human rights. The military's actions in 2017 were the culmination of years of systematic oppression, and it marked one of the worst human rights violations of our time. Historical context. The Rohingya people are an ethnic minority group who have lived in Myanmar for centuries. They are predominantly Muslim and have their own distinct language, culture, and traditions. However, the Myanmar government has refused to recognize them as citizens, instead considering them illegal immigrants from neighboring Bangladesh. The Rohingya people have faced discrimination and persecution for decades, with their movements and access to basic services such as healthcare and education restricted. The Myanmar government has also been accused of denying them the right to vote and run for office. In 1982, the Myanmar government passed a law that effectively stripped the Rohingya people of their citizenship, rendering them stateless. This has left them without legal protection, and they are often subjected to violence and abuse with little recourse for justice. The military crackdown. In August 2017, Rohingya militants attacked police posts in Rakhine State, killing a dozen officers. In response, the Myanmar military launched a brutal crackdown on the Rohingya people, which it claimed was necessary to root out terrorism. The military's response was swift and violent, with reports of mass killings, torture, and rape. Villages were burned to the ground, and hundreds of thousands of Rohingya people were forced to flee their homes, crossing the border into neighboring Bangladesh. The United Nations described the military's actions as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Human rights groups and journalists have documented widespread atrocities, including the killing of babies, the burning of homes, and the systematic use of rape as a weapon of war. The aftermath. The Rohingya crisis has had a devastating impact on the Rohingya people, with hundreds of thousands of them forced to flee their homes and seek refuge in neighboring countries, particularly Bangladesh. The refugee camps in Bangladesh are overcrowded and under-resourced, with basic needs such as food, water, and sanitation often not met. The Myanmar government has denied any wrongdoing, instead blaming the Rohingya militants for the violence. It has also been accused of restricting access to aid organizations and journalists, making it difficult to get accurate information about the situation on the ground. The international community has condemned the military's actions and called for accountability for those responsible for the atrocities. However, little progress has been made, and the Rohingya people continue to live in precarious conditions, with little hope for a safe and dignified return to their homes in Myanmar. Conclusion. The Rohingya crisis in Myanmar is a tragic example of the consequences of ethnic and religious persecution. The military crackdown in 2017 was a brutal and systematic violation of human rights, resulting in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. The Rohingya people have faced discrimination and violence for decades, and the crisis in 2017 marked a new low in their treatment. The international community must continue to speak out against these human rights violations and hold those responsible accountable for their actions. It is also essential to address the root causes of the crisis, including the denial of citizenship and basic human rights to the Rohingya people. Until the Myanmar government recognizes their rights and grants them citizenship, the Rohingya people will continue to be vulnerable to violence and persecution. Chapter 2: The Atrocities. The Rohingya refugee crisis is not just a humanitarian crisis, but it is also a crisis of human rights violations. The Myanmar government has been accused of committing atrocities against the Rohingya people, including ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, and genocide. In this chapter, we will discuss the atrocities committed against the Rohingya people, including the events leading up to the crisis and the ongoing violence. The Rohingya people are an ethnic and religious minority group who have been living in Rakhine State, Myanmar, for generations. However, the Myanmar government has refused to recognize them as citizens, rendering them stateless. This has led to discrimination and persecution of the Rohingya people, including restrictions on their freedom of movement, access to education, and healthcare. The violence against the Rohingya people intensified in 2012 when clashes erupted between the Rohingya people and the Rakhine Buddhists. The Myanmar government responded with force, and many Rohingya people were killed, injured, or displaced. Since then, the situation has only deteriorated, with the Myanmar government carrying out a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Rohingya people. In August 2017, the Myanmar military launched a brutal crackdown on the Rohingya people, following an attack by Rohingya militants on security posts. The military used excessive force, including firing on civilians, burning down villages, and committing widespread sexual violence. Thousands of Rohingya people were killed, and over 700,000 fled to neighboring Bangladesh. The United Nations has described the situation as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing and has accused the Myanmar government of committing crimes against humanity and genocide. The International Criminal Court has also launched an investigation into the crimes committed against the Rohingya people. The atrocities committed against the Rohingya people have had a devastating impact on their lives. Many have lost their homes, their loved ones, and their sense of security. Those who have fled to Bangladesh are living in overcrowded refugee camps, with limited access to basic necessities such as food, water, and healthcare. The trauma of the violence has also had a severe impact on the mental health of the Rohingya people, especially children. The international community has been slow to respond to after the initial attack. The Myanmar military launched a widespread and systematic campaign of violence against the Rohingya, including torture, rape, and extrajudicial killings. Many villages were burned to the ground, and entire families were killed. Survivors reported that soldiers and Buddhist mobs entered their homes, looted their belongings, and destroyed property before setting it on fire. As a result of these atrocities, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fled to neighboring Bangladesh, seeking safety and refuge. However, the conditions in the refugee camps were often squalid, with inadequate food, water, and sanitation facilities. Many of the refugees, particularly children, suffered from malnutrition and disease. The international community, including the United Nations, condemned the violence and called for an end to the atrocities. However, the Myanmar government denied the allegations and claimed that they were fighting terrorism. In 2017, a report by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights described the violence as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. The report documented widespread and systematic human rights abuses, including mass killings, torture, and rape, committed by Myanmar's security forces. The report also named several senior officials who should be investigated and prosecuted for their involvement in the atrocities. Despite the international pressure and condemnation, the Myanmar government has not taken any meaningful steps to address the situation. The Rohingya who remain in Myanmar continue to face discrimination and persecution, with limited access to basic services and opportunities. The situation in the refugee camps in Bangladesh remains precarious, with ongoing concerns about the safety and well-being of the refugees. The plight of the Rohingya has drawn international attention and concern, with many organizations and individuals advocating for their rights and calling for justice for the victims of the atrocities. The long-term solution to the crisis remains elusive, with the need for accountability, justice, and a lasting political solution still urgent. In conclusion, Chapter 2 of the documentary on the Rohingya crisis highlights the atrocities committed by the Myanmar military against the Rohingya population. The systematic campaign of violence, including torture, rape, and extrajudicial killings, resulted in hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fleeing to neighboring Bangladesh. Despite the international condemnation, the Myanmar government has not taken meaningful steps to address the situation, leaving the Rohingya in a precarious and vulnerable situation. The chapter serves as a reminder of the need for accountability, justice, and a lasting political solution to the crisis. Chapter 3: The Journey. The journey of the Rohingya refugees fleeing from Myanmar to Bangladesh is a harrowing tale of survival and endurance. It is a story of people who were forced to leave their homes and families behind in order to escape the persecution and violence inflicted upon them by the Myanmar military. In this chapter, we will explore the challenges faced by the Rohingya as they made their way across the border into Bangladesh, the conditions they faced along the way, and the difficulties they encountered upon arrival in refugee camps. The journey begins in Myanmar, where the Rohingya had been living for generations. However, their citizenship and basic human rights were denied by the government, which classified them as illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. This led to their persecution and violence at the hands of the military, which resulted in mass killings, rape, and the destruction of entire villages. Faced with these atrocities, the Rohingya had no choice but to flee their homes and head for the border with Bangladesh. Many had to walk for days through difficult terrain, with little food or water, and faced the constant threat of being caught by the military or attacked by local mobs. Once they arrived in Bangladesh, the Rohingya faced a new set of challenges. The government initially refused to allow them entry, and those who did manage to cross the border were forced to live in makeshift camps without adequate shelter, food, or medical care. These camps were overcrowded, with families crammed together in small spaces, and the lack of sanitation and clean water led to the spread of disease. Many of the refugees suffered from malnutrition, dehydration, and other health problems. Despite these challenges, the Rohingya continued to persevere, relying on each other for support and solidarity. They formed communities within the camps and worked together to provide food, water, and shelter for their families. NGOs and aid organizations also stepped in to provide assistance, although resources were often limited and the needs of the refugees were immense. Despite the difficult conditions, the Rohingya remained determined to survive and rebuild their lives. They held on to hope for a better future and continued to advocate for their rights as human beings and citizens of Myanmar. However, the challenges they faced were far from over as they continued to live in uncertain conditions without a clear path to a stable and secure future. In conclusion, Chapter 3 of the Rohingya Refugee Crisis documentary explores the arduous journey of the Rohingya as they fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh, the challenges they faced along the way, and the difficulties they encountered upon arrival in refugee camps. Despite the overwhelming adversity, the Rohingya remain resilient and determined to rebuild their lives and advocate for their rights. Chapter 4: Life in the Camps. After fleeing violence and persecution in Myanmar, Rohingya refugees are forced to settle in crowded refugee camps in Bangladesh. The living conditions in these camps are dire. The refugees face many challenges as they try to rebuild their lives. In this chapter, we will explore the daily life of Rohingya refugees living in the camps and the challenges they face. The refugee camps. There are currently over 1 million Rohingya refugees living in refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. The camps are overcrowded and lack basic amenities such as clean water, sanitation facilities, and health. The refugees are living in makeshift shelters made of tarpaulin and bamboo, which offer little protection from the elements. Food and water. Access to food and water is a major challenge for the refugees. Many families are surviving on just one meal a day, and there have been reports of malnutrition and starvation. The water sources in the camps are often contaminated, which has led to the spread of waterborne diseases such as cholera and typhoid fever. Healthcare. The healthcare system in the refugee camps is overwhelmed and under-resourced. There are very few doctors or medical facilities, and basic medicines are often in short supply. A lack of proper sanitation facilities has also contributed to the spread of diseases. Education. Many children in the camps are not receiving an education. There are few schools in the camps, and those that do exist are often overcrowded and under-resourced. A lack of education opportunities is a major concern for the long-term future of the Rohingya refugees. Livelihoods. The refugees are not allowed to work outside the camps, and so many are unable to earn a living. There are limited opportunities for income generation within the camps, and so many families are dependent on aid. Protection. The Rohingya refugees are also at risk of violence and exploitation within the camps. Women and children are particularly vulnerable to gender-based violence and trafficking. The lack of protection for the refugees is a major concern. Conclusion. The life of Rohingya refugees in the camps is extremely challenging, and they face a wide range of issues including lack of food and water, limited access to healthcare and education, and restricted livelihood opportunities. The international community must work together to provide support and assistance to the Rohingya refugees and to address the root causes of the crisis in Myanmar. Only through sustained efforts can we hope to improve the lives of the Rohingya refugees and ensure that they have a better future. Chapter 5: The Future. The future of the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh remains uncertain. While some refugees have returned to Myanmar, the majority continue to live in camps and face a number of challenges. One of the main challenges facing the Rohingya refugees is their lack of legal status. They are not recognized as citizens of Myanmar, and the government of Bangladesh does not recognize them as refugees. As a result, they are unable to access basic rights and services, such as education, healthcare, and employment. The conditions in the refugee camps are also a cause for concern. Overcrowding, poor sanitation, and lack of access to clean water and food have led to the spread of diseases such as cholera and diphtheria. The camps are also vulnerable to natural disasters such as cyclones and flooding. Despite these challenges, there have been some positive developments for the Rohingya refugees. The government of Bangladesh has worked with international organizations to provide aid and support to the refugees. NGOs and other groups have also been working to provide education, healthcare, and other services to the refugees. Efforts have also been made to find a long-term solution to the crisis. The government of Bangladesh has signed agreements with Myanmar to repatriate the refugees, but so far few refugees have returned due to concerns about safety and security. The international community has also been working to put pressure on Myanmar to address the root causes of the crisis and ensure that the Rohingya refugees are able to return home safely and with dignity. In addition, there have been calls for the international community to provide more support to the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. This includes increased funding for humanitarian aid and efforts to address the underlying causes of the crisis, such as discrimination and persecution of the Rohingya in Myanmar. Overall, the future of the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh remains uncertain. While there have been some positive developments, much more needs to be done to ensure that the refugees are able to access their basic rights and services and that a long-term solution to the crisis is found. It is important that the international community continues to prioritize this issue and work towards a just and sustainable solution for the Rohingya people. The Rohingya refugee crisis in Bangladesh is a devastating and ongoing tragedy. From the violent persecution in Myanmar to the difficult and often inhumane conditions in refugee camps in Bangladesh, the Rohingya people have faced unimaginable hardship and suffering. However, amidst the tragedy and despair, there are stories of hope and resilience. The Bangladeshi government and people have stepped up in a remarkable way to provide aid and support to the refugees, even as they face their own economic and social challenges. As this documentary has shown, the Rohingya crisis is a complex issue with no easy solutions. But it is clear that the international community must do more to support the Rohingya people and hold the Myanmar government accountable for their actions. We must also recognize and honor the incredible strength and resilience of the Rohingya people themselves, who have shown incredible courage and perseverance in the face of unimaginable adversity. As viewers, we have a responsibility to bear witness to the Rohingya crisis and advocate for change. We must use our voices and our resources to support organizations working on the ground in Bangladesh and hold our governments accountable for their role in addressing this crisis. Ultimately, the Rohingya crisis is a human rights issue that demands our attention and action. We cannot stand idly by as thousands of innocent people suffer and die. We must act with compassion, empathy, and urgency to support the Rohingya people and work towards a more just and peaceful world.